All right. Welcome, everyone, to our new show, DFI-NANCIAL Fridays. We are so excited. We've been off air for a little bit, and I got to tell you, there's some nerves here, right? And so we are excited to bring you our new show. I'm going to tell you all about it in 1 second. But first, I wanted to welcome Nathan. Nathan, how are you doing?
Doing great. So excited to be back. It was about a month that we were off camera. So excited to be back in front of it and spilling some knowledge for everyone.
Yeah, we got a lot of feedback. By the way, those that don't know me, my name is Alfred. We're from Diversified Capital. We'll jump into all that goodness in just a second. But a little chit chat here. I think got a lot of feedback from our initial shows, our Mythbusters, our webinars. And you know what? I
Mhm.
had people reaching out to us just talking about how much they enjoyed the information, kind of the raw chatting that we have, Nate. It was
Yeah,
awesome. And so those that reached out to us, I really appreciate it. I think it gave us a little bit more motivation, put in a little
super
bit more
helpful.
production time, right? And
Yeah.
again, if you're watching this, you guys want to hear more about different things, we're going to take that feedback. That's what we do here to make these shows better for you guys.
Hmm.
This is what we like to do. We like to talk about finances in a way that you guys understand, right? And so this is what this show is about. DFI-NANCIAL Fridays. We're going to be mixing it up a little bit where we add in a little bit more of a market update in the beginning, what we're seeing, what Nathan especially is seeing in the world, right? That
Mhm.
affects your investments or just affects financial decisions, right? So talking about it in a way where maybe it's not quite Wall Street Journal-esque, right? So a little bit easier to understand. And then I think we're going to jump in similar to our Mythbusters, where we talk a little bit more about financial planning because that is our bread and butter, right? We want to talk
Mhm.
about the ways that we can help you, different topics, right? So we're going to get back into that as well, right? And so before we get started with all of that, I just wanted to remind anyone who's watching on the show that, look, whatever we're talking about here isn't meant to be personalized financial advice. It's all for general financial education, right? That's what we're trying to do is bring, and that's one of our philosophies is to bring this level of education and knowledge for more to be able to consume. I think in our industry, which I'll talk about in the second half of this show, that there's so much restrictions around that. And so we're trying to break that down. Okay. But again, we're going to start with the market update. And then in the second half of today's show, we're going to talk about how financial planners can actually help. Right. So what are we doing? Like, what are we doing on a day-to-day basis? And Nate, people ask me that all the time. Alfred, what do you
For
even
sure.
do? Right. And
Yeah.
so I think that's what we're going to go in and talk about. What situations can we help with, or just a general financial planning person can they help with, right? Because if it's not
Mhm.
us, we hope you find someone out there that can help you, but you want to
Totally.
find someone that fits you and has the right motivations. Okay. And then, of course, anything that we talk about investment related or tax related, both of those things, we're not soliciting for you to buy any type of investment products, nor are we providing you any specific tax related advice here. Okay. Everything is on a general education level. And those are things that you should reach out to your tax professional or reach out to us if you want to learn more specifics about your situation. Uh, let's get started. Let's get started. Give
I'm
me a
excited.
little
We're
bit
back.
of a market update, right? That people can
My
actually
gosh.
understand, right? Man, I'm putting you in a tough position because so many things that you can walk through. But give
Oh,
me a
yeah.
couple things. Give me a couple things.
I mean, obviously, we got to start with what's in front of us in the next couple of weeks, right? We have the presidential election coming November 3rd. Hopefully, we find out who the new president is on November 3rd, but with all those mail in ballots that are expected, maybe it takes a couple of days, but we've got a lot coming because of that. So, just, us trying to keep this on a financial focus, I just thought it was interesting so far. From July until September, there was a huge fundraising difference between Joe Biden and President Trump, right? So the Democrats have been able to raise $1.5 billion, whereas in that same time frame, the Republicans raised $650 million. Now, who knows what that actually means for the election? I mean, you look at all those huge rallies that Trump is putting together, and it seems like there's a lot of energy behind him as a potential reelection candidate. But then you see everyone on the left side really, putting their dollars behind Joe Biden. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, from Wall Street's perspective, uh, everyone's sort of nervous around potentially what Biden's presidency might present because of some of the tax cuts. But you have to remember, we did have Obama had a very positive 8-year cycle for the stock market, even without a lot of those tax cuts in place. But times are different now. We understand that we have the pandemic. Introducing additional taxes during a pandemic might be risky. So, we might see a little bit of a sell-off if Biden does get elected. Meanwhile, if we have Trump, well, who knows? I mean, we may have continued fights on the street. So it's a little nervous. People are just a little nervous to see what the next 4 years of Trump means. But for Wall Street, I think everyone just wants the election to be done so we can see who's elected and how to adjust from there. Wall Street's very good about adjusting to whatever comes next. So we're less than 3 weeks away. That's obviously huge news on Wall Street's mind. We've got some other things going on, more pressing though, and that's this next stimulus bill, right? The HEROES Act. We have a $400 billion disconnect between what the Republicans are willing to offer and what the Democrats are hoping to pass. Democrats are wanting $2.2 trillion. Republicans are wanting $1.8 trillion, $400 billion disconnect. Meanwhile, we still have an uptick going on with jobless claims. We had almost 900,000 jobless claims take place last week. So clearly we need additional stimulus. If that passes, just like we saw the stimulus that passed earlier in March this year, we probably see the market rally off of that. Obviously, stimulus means more dollars in people's pockets, keeps people employed, keeps the economy going. Wall Street loves that. And so we're waiting to see if hopefully in the next coming days, weeks, maybe before the election, we get that final stimulus bill passed and we get that money back into corporations, mom and pop shops, individuals' pockets, so we can keep this economy V-shaped recovery that we're starting to see, hopefully see it continue. And we're going to see hopefully some gains in the market if that does happen. The third political item is now we unfortunately, sadly, since we've come off air, we've lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That was a huge, devastating blow. A lot of, just everyone in the U.S. really supported her and what she did for our country. And now we have this potential fight in front of us. Are we going to elect a new Supreme Court justice? Are we going to wait for the election to settle and then decide on that? If we elect it now, are we going to then pack the courts and potentially have the next president push for even more Supreme Court justices to sit on the Supreme Court? So much unknown around that. And obviously, those decisions are going to impact our country for years to come. So we have a lot of political events packed into a very short window of time. Unfortunately, Wall Street seems to be pretty calm about all of it. So it's been encouraging to see the market recovery that we've had this year since that 35% market sell-off. But we've still been encouraging people to just be cautious when investing new dollars prior to the election. There's just so many things that can still go wrong and cause a lot of volatility in the next coming weeks. So get those dollars ready, but we're just exercising caution at this point. The final one, not related to political stance, is CNBC came out with an article about Robinhood. Supposedly, the dark web is selling a lot of our brokerage account logins. So Robinhood by no means is the only company being affected by this. They were the only ones that were just kind of highlighted in the article. A lot of other companies are also being impacted by this. Robinhood has since come out with some suggestions on how to improve their security protocols. I'm sure a lot of other brokerage firms will as well. But again, we're just bringing to your attention the security protocols of all of these brokerage firms. So make sure you're constantly refreshing your passwords and wherever possible, introduce that two-factor authentication. So that was just an interesting tidbit that I saw that just kind of tucked away from all the political events going on this year or this week that I wanted to bring to your attention. So change your passwords, keep those passwords fresh and don't keep them the same ones for years on end.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole point about like talking in this beginning part of the show is to give you what we're thinking about this week, what we've seen from clients and what they're asking us about, right? Like that's the whole point of the beginning of it. Now, you mentioned a good point there, right? Which is, I think people ask me all the time, like, what do you think if Biden wins or what do you think if Trump wins? I was like, look, at the end of the day, if you're asking because of the market, like, what do you think the market is going to do? Remember that markets don't like uncertainty. And this is an uncertain event right now.
Totally.
Like when the election happens, like once somebody gets elected, don't care who it is, right? At the moment, I'm going to say the market doesn't care who it is, right? Then at that point, there is a certainty around it and the market, to your point, will adjust. And I think That's probably the best way to think about it right now is, or any events that happen is like what certainty there is. I mean, look at March. There was such a huge uncertainty about the pandemic. We just didn't know. It's never happened in 100 years, this type of, stress on the world. But then once things kind of settled in, March 23rd, you go back, all of a sudden you have a situation, the market recovers 30%. We've covered that before, right? We've covered that before, but it's just an idea that it's the uncertainty that bugs the market. Sometimes the result itself bugs it less, right? Sometimes.
And you can even look back at the last election cycle, right? In 2016, we had two very surprising events. We had the Brexit vote in May or June of that year, right? Market fell like 5% immediately. Gave it 1 week. 1 week later, it was back to break even as if nothing had happened.
Yeah.
Same thing happened with Trump getting elected in 2016. I mean, the after hours pricing was like maybe -10. Like it was like, oh my God, this guy just got elected. We did not see that coming. But then guess what? Within a couple of days, it was like the market just shrugged it off. It's like, okay, well, now we know what to adjust for and we'll move forward. And we expect probably very similar things to happen now. Not to say there's not going to be wild volatility, especially if, I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong potentially, peaceful transition of power, all sorts of things, right? So, but once the dust has settled, Wall Street cares about corporate profits. That's what they care about. And what I think is even more powerful than potentially this presidential election is the Federal Reserve's actions. And the Federal Reserve is the one that has said, we will keep rates at zero basically for the next 3 or 4 years. That's going to keep this easy money train going so that corporations can still borrow money cheaply, expand on their growth initiatives, and keep pushing out more and more profits. And so just because Biden wins or Trump wins doesn't mean that the Fed is all of a sudden going to change course immediately. So
and that's why, right, Nate? Like people say, I don't get why the market's going up. I'm like, rates have never been this low, right? Like if you look at interest rates, they've never been this low. The amount of money that just got punched into the market, right, from the stimulus bills, right? I think it was like 10x from 2008, something along those lines. Some graphics that show almost 20% of money in the US was printed in 2020, right? Something along those lines. And so there are reasons why the market's up. It's just because there's a lot of money flowing in. So remember that, right? And remember one other thing, which is, again, when you're thinking about your investment decisions, right? It's very hard. It's very hard if you take one event and say, I believe this is going to happen and make a decision on it. Like, I think, right, the election is going to go south. Like, I don't like the results. Doesn't mean half the country doesn't like the results, right? You have to remember that. And so you might pull out the money and then the market goes right back up. So you just have to keep your long-term goals in check. And look, I mean, it kind of leads into this next part of the show that I'm talking about. Like, where as financial planners, right, can we become helpful? This is one of those things, right? We'll talk about how, from a sounding board perspective, we really come in and just provide these answers. But before that, I think there's a reason why, Nate, we want to talk about like where a financial planner can be beneficial, right? Because I think for me, I went into this industry not knowing very much 8 years ago, 10 years ago about what financial planners do. But as I got into the industry, I realized, right, it didn't take very much for someone to hire you like a Morgan Stanley or a J, right, like the big banks, and be like, here's 200 names you have to call every day to try to sell something to.
Right.
That's financial advisors. Honestly, both of you and I got lucky when we started our careers that we really didn't have to make these calls, right? We got an opportunity to sit down and talk with people. That's what we enjoy. It's what drives us every day. But what's interesting is that I think most people today still, I mean, the market is dominated by the big banks. And when you think of financial planners and advisors, right, the first thing that most people think about is like, ooh, I don't know that I like what they're selling me, right? Like that's his first thought. Like it shouldn't be about what someone is selling you. Unfortunately, that's how most of the market does it. Okay. So when we talk about how financial planning, true financial planning can benefit you, there's a couple things. One, sounding board. Okay. Two, I think it's the idea that we can be here so that you don't have to make panic decisions, right? We'll also talk about the idea that like there's so much info out there sometimes. You don't even know what info that you should be looking at to make decisions. How does our team bring that all back together and help you weed out what is necessary and not necessary to make decisions? And then, of course, finally, the idea that, look, there are certain things about, like, educationally, right? Like, and again, if you've seen our shows, that's the biggest thing. It's the education portion of it, right? The idea that we want to be able to say, well, when do you have to make a quarterly payment? Like, what are the rules around that? Like, you shouldn't have to Google that. Or if you do, right, does that apply to me? So having a planner itself helps you answer those questions themselves, right? So let's go through some of that, Nate. Like, let's go through and say, when we talk about a helpful sounding board, right, what should a proper planner, right, actually be doing? Like, in a situation that we think, okay, and again, I think it's probably biased, but like in the sense of like what we think is an appropriate financial planning advice when someone asks for a sounding board, like advice, what do you talk about?
Yeah. I mean, one of the first rules I give to my clients when they sign up with me is contact me before you take action on things, because oftentimes, like, clients will come to me and say, "Hey, Nathan, I did this," but it's like, "Oh, client, we could have done it so much better if had you contacted me." So it's something that we encourage all of our clients to do, is to contact us. Emails are great. I mean, how hard is it to write out an email? But then we can be a little more thoughtful and respond to what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Something that's coming up in the next month or two for almost everybody is open enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
Which medical plan should we opt into? Should we do the HSA? What about dependent care FSA? What about this disability and life insurance benefit? What of that is applicable to me? What do I need to opt into? What don't I need? Going through those decisions live time with the client just gives that extra peace of mind, so that you know that for the next year, because that's something you lock into for an entire calendar year, you feel a little more confident behind those decisions, as opposed to like, hey, I wish I would have done this, but oh, now I have to wait until November of 2021. It's a long time for us to wait, and those open windows close. So that's a great example. One you just gave is a great example. I can't tell you how many clients I have that are like, hey, let's put all of our money on the sidelines because this presidential election is going to cause volatility.
Yeah.
What is the chance that you actually are on your trading account to buy, even if the market does fall? Like, let's say, okay, the market falls 5%, 10%. What's going to give you that confidence to say, hey, I'm going to buy at 10%? At that point, maybe you say, oh, I think it's going to go down 15. I think it's going to go down 20. And before you know it, it's right back to break even. So we experienced this already earlier this year. So many clients were not on their trading account in order to buy back into the market. So why try and fool yourself that you can be a market timer? And again, go back to the concept of, hey, we've put out this plan. We're not going to use this money for the next 10 years, 20 years, maybe, if it's shorter term. For a house purchase, we've already put that allocation strategy together. And so even when these market volatility events happen, we're not trying to tweak your investment portfolio mindset too dramatically, because that's, over time, it's just going to lead to too much opportunity loss. Yep. And so it's having those live conversations, because things always come up. Having that sounding board to make sure you're making the rational decision, I think, is super helpful.
Yeah. And like, when I think about financial planning, I think about financial advisors, right? I think it's the idea that someone should come at a topic objectively, not because you haven't, right? Like, there's compensation, there's fees, okay? There's fees to be paid, but it should be something that's a flat fee, right? A consulting fee, something that's straightforward. So we call that, right, for a lot of people, fee-only financial planning. Like, if you look on the way that we provide service, right, it's a monthly fee. But why do we do that? It's because once someone pays for that monthly fee for the education for our boot camp, again, that's it, right? And so it includes the emails, it includes the conversations. And so trust can be built, because trust is so important in such a personal issue when we talk about finances, right, Nate? Like, it's so much of it, like, we become very close friends and real with all of our clients, that
Totally.
that trust is necessary for someone to discuss something as personal as their own financial picture. And if there's any worry that that person is out to sell me something, you're not going to reach out to them. You're not going to try to talk to them as much as maybe you want to, because you're worried about they're going to suck you into a conversation for the next hour and 15 minutes and talk about
nobody wants to be sold to.
Exactly. So I think that's the most important piece, is like having a trusted sounding board, right?
Yeah.
Also, sound decisions. You talked about that already, not making panic decisions. Or the other way around, this year is probably the biggest year in terms of last minute home purchases. I've never seen so many people email me, Nate, be like, it is time to buy. But it makes sense. If I'm trapped, shelter in place in an apartment, and I've been wanting to buy a house, I'm going to reach out and say, how do we do it? And guess what? Most of the time is, Nate, I want to make a bid next weekend, but today is Thursday. Right? Right? It's like, all right, we got to figure it out. And I think having that mindset, or at least someone talking you off the ledge from buying or talking you over the ledge to buy, it depends on the situation, and it depends on each person. But your planner should be able to do that. And if they're not, it's probably time to find another planner, right? And so that's kind of the thought process behind financial education. And that's the process in which our industry drives it based off of dollars, managing assets first. That's what everyone out there does in most cases. They want your accounts. You need to have 500K. You need to have $1 million. I mean, everyone, look at the wealth gap right now, Nate. I mean, why is that the case? Probably because over time, right, our industry has served the top 1% for way longer than it should have. And
for sure,
part for me, what DeFi means, right? Defying the financial norms of how things have been done and opening up for like this next year, 2021. Our goal as a company is to be able to provide financial education and advice to a more diversified group of people. Why? Because it care about that, right? And I'm hoping more people can follow and do this, because the more companies that do this, the more normalized people like us with our jobs would be. Like, it's not hard to get financial advice, and it shouldn't be hard to do it. Right. And so, and then finally, I think you've seen, right? And if you have not, go check out our YouTube channel, right? With our webinars and shows where we've done in the past already. We're all about education, because I feel that if I can provide a client the way that I'm thinking about a topic, I've won, right? Like, if I can get them to think about their equity comp or the strategy about the investment side and the way that we would think about it, we've given the client the ability to make those decisions, not today, but in the future and going forward. And again, that's also part of financial planning. You know, we don't expect a client to be with us for 10, 15, 20 years. Like, things are going to change, but I think they can carry that knowledge with them throughout that time. So, you know, in those situations, it could be, I mean, this year, again, IPOs across the board, right? DPOs, direct listings. And for us, it's been a busy time because there was nobody out there at the time with these companies that were taking them to go listed to help them with the educational side of these questions. And I think that's where we came in. And again, we're hoping more companies can come in to say, can we just give the advice for a set fee? And guess what? People are very willing to do that because they can find the trust in the advice given. Right. Okay. So those are the things right there that's what we do day to day, but it's also what I know the industry is not right now. And I think we're passionate about changing that. Okay. It doesn't have to be through us again, but this, for you guys, this show is to show you guys how to think about a financial planner, right? Like, what we do to actually help. And if they're talking about managing assets right away or buying this product right away without really knowing you, then you know that you've encountered the majority of how the industry does that, right? But know that
a huge red flag.
Huge red flag, huge red flag. But know that
if you don't know how your advisor's compensated, that's a huge red flag too.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And it should be upfront. It should be easy. Right. And it doesn't have to be a difficult process. Okay.
Right.
So it is something, though, I think you do have to spend time on it. It is a time commitment. I'm not going to lie. Right. Like that is something that you have to spend time on it. But just like anything else, the more time you put into it, the more you get out of it. And your awareness of your finances takes away anxiety. It does so many things. Half the time I'm a therapist when I'm in a meeting with a client, right? And so, but it feels good, right? It feels good to be able to have those conversations, and the clients feel good coming out of it because they feel secure about what their financial future looks like. All right. Awesome. So we are running up on time here for our show today. We are excited. This is just going to be one of many. We put a lot of thought and time into this DFI-NANCIAL Friday show. And every Friday going forward from 3 p.m. Pacific, we're going to come on live across our platforms to give you our take, right, of what's going on the week, and then give you guys a little bit of tidbits about what's interesting that happened to us in our meetings around financial planning, and share that experience with you guys. Hopefully you guys can take that, apply it to yourself, right? Or at least start asking the right questions, right? Knowing what to ask for the questions is half the battle. So we're excited to bring you guys that, and looking forward again to getting this show kicked off here. And this is, of course, just our premiere, but ready to get at it over the next couple Fridays here.
Yeah, and next week I think it's going to be a really, really great topic for us to talk through. It's a lot of just discussion around what to think about if you decide to move elsewhere because of the work from home environment that's going on. Obviously, us being here in the San Francisco Bay Area and California, a lot of people are moving to Washington or Colorado or Texas and just generally outside of California. But they're recognizing now that some of their employers are adjusting their income. So we'll discuss all sorts of topics related to that next week, but definitely looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you guys for joining us on our premiere. We're looking forward to having you guys for every week going forward, and subscribe to get notifications as we go live. And again, we are Diversified Capital signing off here. My name is Alfred, and we got, of course, Nathan over there joining us too.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.